Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, I'm just gonna say this. First episode of 2024. Oh boy, new year, and not just any year, a presidential election year. Oh boy, things are about to get very, very heated in this year. Oh boy. Also, I'm just going to mention another thing. If I sound weird in this episode, it's because I finally got my tooth extracted that I've been clamoring about for a million years now. Downside, I have stitches in my face and there's a tooth that is missing. Upside, drugs, baby, yes! Which I am using in a responsible manner purely to aid with the healing process of my extraction. But anyways, with that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, a very, almost heart attack moment happened for the Russian people because there was a very interesting thing that happened with a figure that you might be familiar with. The Russian politician Alexei Navalny briefly disappeared for a little bit. People were going to, meet him and whatever. And then when I went to the prison system, the prison said, yeah, we don't know where he is. And then people were like, wait, what? Who? And if you don't remember, Navalny is a politician that has been very critical of Putin. So there's been a very people were afraid, what had happened to him. And he has been found. Turns out he's in a penal colony near the Arctic Circle. And he was transferred there basically for no reason. And as the article states, the region that he's being held in is notorious for long and severe winters. The town is about 100 kilometers from Vorkuta, whose coal mines were among the harshest Soviet gulag prison camp system. It is almost impossible to get to this colony. It is almost impossible to even send letters there. This is the highest possible level of isolation from the world. So what people thought was him being dragged behind a wall and shot turns out is a little bit worse than that, as he's basically been pushed to this extremely isolated area. My guess would be that it is basically them trying to basically just having them imply to have Navalny kill himself. Because Navalny is one of the few people to, again, be openly critical of Putin. There's only two other people that I could think of that have been openly critical of Putin in Russia. One was a Russian person who was running for the presidency that just got banned due to the fact that she was very critical of Putin, especially due to the fact that she was one of the few Russian politicians that was openly against the war in Ukraine. Then there's another one that I forget his name, but he was the only person to vote against the Crimean annexation, and now he has fled to Ukraine and is basically serving on their front lines. He's also interesting because I think he's one of the only left-wing politicians, aside from that female politician that I mentioned a little bit ago. He was one of the only left-wing opponents of Putin, because even the left-wing in Russia are basically just Putin simps. All the parties that are going to be running in the upcoming election are going to be extensively pro-Putin and / or pro-Putin's politics. If they literally, I think on the Wikipedia page for parties, it's literally just they have two stances next to their party. Are they pro-Putin or are they pro-Ukraine war? And you can never find one that is no. I just checked the wiki page and apparently it's not a thing anymore. But they used to have that, where it was literally pro-Putin or pro-Ukraine war. I guess they're trying to move past the Ukraine war. But anyways, hopefully something that isn't inherently evil and bad happens to Navalny, so we'll be able to make Russia a better place, I guess. And maybe Russia will finally elect a new president. Very unlikely, but possible. Actually, not possible. Speaking of presidents, Mexico's president has gotten into a very interesting thing recently. You see, because recently, for those who don't know, Biden has been having a little bit of trouble because some people keep perceiving him to be incredibly weak on immigration, not based on any data or based on anything actually. Much like a lot of things with Biden's presidency, it's all based on vibes. Things just feel different. Yeah, sure, Biden isn't actually that bad of a president, but he just feels like a bad president. He just feels like an atrocious president. He feels like this. It feels like inflation's getting worse and worse, even though it's not really that bad comparatively to other economic downturns the United States has ever had. It just feels bad. And despite the fact that Biden has been perceived by the left as incredibly weak on his anti-Trump immigration status, people still view Biden as being incredibly weak on immigration, period. Like, oh, he's just letting all these immigrants waltz in and blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And as such, he's been trying to change the Democratic Party's position to be a bit more tougher on immigration. At the very least, seemingly trying, he's still trying to paint himself as a nicer person, but like nice, but also not easy, I guess. This is going to be a very weird comparison, but picture it on one end, this is going to be the dumbest way I can explain this, but picture it like this. The American people, they look at Biden and picture Biden as the high school slut. He's easy. He lets everybody go in. Everybody gets a turn. Meanwhile, Trump is the prude. Nobody gets in. You gotta work really hard to get in there. But Biden is trying to paint himself now as someone who will still let you in, but not as easy as you would think. And one of the big things that he's been trying to do is trying to make sure that Mexico's president, AMLO, is actually trying to help the immigration problem, because unlike again Trump and other Republican Party politicians, they view the Mexican leaders as we can't work with them. They view the country as basically being run by the cartels and that everything down there is trash. Meanwhile, Biden again is trying to paint himself in a different position. So he's trying to work with AMLO to try and get things done. But there's one big problem. You see, AMLO doesn't view his country as the problems for the immigration problems, because much like America, Mexico has a sort of attitude towards its south. America views Mexico as the problem with immigration, and Mexico views Central America as the problem with immigration. Mexicans have a very high horse about being better than Central Americans. So what ends up happening is that AMLO is basically trying to pin all the problems, again, to Central American countries, saying they're using my country as a ease through to get into your country. And he's basically said that I'll try to help you with that problem, but Mexicans are not the problem with illegal immigration. But in that somewhat xenophobic tirade, AMLO has actually hidden something interesting, where he's actually told Biden that one of the ways that he will help Biden with immigration can only be done if Biden helps Central American countries. He wants Biden to help countries where a lot of immigration is supposedly coming from, again, countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, and Cuba, and he wants Biden to open the doors to them in regards to their economic trade and to help better their economies so that they are more inclined to stay in their home countries as opposed to trying to get a better life in America. AMLO will say things in a somewhat right-leaning tone, and then in actuality, he has secret leftism in there. It's what the heck? That's crazy. And from what I've seen, apparently there is something being done, because I read a different article that said that AMLO and Biden have reached an agreement to do something, and it's I don't think it's going to be that big or that drastic, but it's that's a better thing than Biden being extremely harsh on immigration. Speaking of immigration, Lauren Boebert has decided to do some immigrating of her own. Now, if you know anything about Lauren Boebert, you may remember that in the last cycle, she actually didn't do so hot. She was literally 1 percentage point away from losing her seat to a moderate Democrat by the name of Adam Frisch. And this upcoming cycle, Adam Frisch wasn't pulling any punches. He was basically okay, we're running this one to win. He's been running around getting support from a lot of, I guess, not necessarily that prominent, but he basically ran the Blue Dogs to get them to assist him because the Blue Dogs are trying to repaint their image. And he did the thing that a lot of Democrats did in the 2024 cycle and announced really, really early so that Democrats will just start flooding him with money so that he has a chance. And he's been doing really well in regards to financials. Literally, people were thinking, like, this could be it. Like, he could make Lauren Boebert lose. And this similar situation has happened before. Colorado District 3 used to be represented by a different Republican. Then there was a Democrat that came in, challenged him, and got a pretty decent margin. Then that Democrat ran again in the next cycle, but then Boebert came in, snatched the Republican nomination, and then made it so that it was difficult to beat her because she was a new face. So there was potential that perhaps that Frisch versus Boebert would not be so favorable to Boebert. And as such, Boebert has decided that she will now run for re-election on the opposite side of her state in order to, like, improve her chances of winning, because the other side of the state is Colorado District 4, which is the seat that is being vacated by Ken Buck, who was already in the midst of a very heavy primary that, like, a lot of people are running in that primary. And, like, now Boebert has thrown her hat in the ring to basically make it so that she is the one who wins. Now, I don't know how well it would play out on that side of the field, but there's some speculation on what might happen in this side of on District 3. Because some people are saying that perhaps District 3 is no longer a Dem stronghold, but I still think there might be a chance, because the Republicans haven't really found a new candidate to be the face. We have to wait until the Republicans find the new person to run before we can make any actual assumptions on Frisch versus whoever else. But there's a funny thing that people have been saying is that, what if Boebert doesn't even win the primary in District 4? Because again, they were already in the midst of a heavy primary, so Boebert throwing her hat in the ring might not do so hot. Hopefully this is the end of Boebert. Speaking of the end, some people were speculating that this would be the end of a presidential candidate, but no, it's not. So basically, for those that don't know, Nikki Haley basically did Civil War revisionism. Well, she didn't basically do it, she did do it. She basically, like, she did the whole thing where it was like, oh, the Civil War, like, someone asked her, like, is the Civil War about slavery, or, like, what was the Civil War about? And she's like, well, it was about the government who was trying to step in on people's freedoms and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, everybody immediately ran and was like, haha, see, she doesn't say the Civil War is about slavery, and now she's trying to renege her comments and saying, like, actually, no, the Civil War was about slavery. It's like, yeah, no shit, it was about slavery. Of course it was. Like, everybody knows that it's about slavery except for the South because of the lost cause bullshit. Which makes sense considering Nikki Haley used to be the governor of South Carolina, the state that literally started the Civil War over slavery. Now, there are a lot of things that people have been trying to do. Like, one thing that people have been trying to do, and this is something I've been sick and tired of, again, is they try to do the thing where it's like, ha, see, they admitted it, they're mask off, the Republicans are mask off. It's like, guys, I don't know what you're talking about. There's never been a mask. The GOP has always had this strategy ever since the Southern strategy of 1960s. They've always said, like, oh, the Civil War was about blah, 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 blah. No, literally, that is what has been going on. And there is a reason why they keep talking about Civil War, and trying to paint the Civil War in a different light. That's because they're literally trying to prepare their side of the aisle for a Civil War. Like, my mom's all involved not involved per se, but she, like, reads all this fucking, like, far-right bullshit nonsense. She, like clamors every day that there's a Civil War coming. There will be no president in 2025. There will be a Civil War. Everyone's gonna die. And blah, 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 blah. This is what they've been doing. Their base is the fucking far-right dumbass idiots. They're the ones who have been clamoring for a Civil War for so long because they think that a Civil War is justified because they've been told, like, oh, the Civil War was about this. The Civil War was about this. Like, my mom, again, even goes like, the Confederate soldiers, they were fighting for their freedoms. Like, no, they fucking weren't. They were fucking fighting to keep people enslaved. They were not fighting for freedom. They were fighting to keep people in chains. But you can't tell anybody this because then they'll get offended. They'll cry and whine. It's my heritage. It's my heritage. Fuck your goddamn heritage. Fuck it. Stop worshipping the objectively evil people in history. You wonder why people call you racist. You're literally defending the people who wanted to keep black people enslaved. And you are saying that those people are part of your heritage. that is part of your history, and not only that, a history you are fucking proud of. Why do you think they do not want their children to go to school? Why do you think that they immediately turn down the information that anybody could read? Why do you think they hate the technology that we have? Because any of those things will give you the objective truth and will not feed you the same bullshit that they've been fed for hundreds of years. And for literally no goddamn reason either. Because these fucking dumbasses, they grew up and had bumfuck, bullshit, literally they were dirt poor for their entire goddamn, histories. Their family never once owned a fucking slave. They didn't reap any of the economic benefits from slavery. So they literally have no reason to defend, slavery or the people who were fighting for slavery. Because they didn't even benefit from it. They are just racist. Anyways, let's just move on from that topic because that'll get me going forever. Let's move on to this next story that just came out. So apparently, Maine's top election official has removed Trump from the 2024 primary ballot. Maine's top election official has removed former President Donald Trump from the state's 2024 primary ballot in a shock decision based on the 14th Amendment's insurrection ban. Maine Secretary of State Shenna Ballows paused her decision pending a potential appeal in a state court, which Trump's team said they intend to file. So, of course, this isn't permanent. This is going to go to a state court and will probably go to the Supreme Court. And funnily enough, this ties to the thing that I was just talking about, because this is, again, literally the same thing that happened in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War. Because since we refused to actually punish the people who did bad things during the Civil War, they went around and started clamoring about their bullshit conspiracy, that they were actually the heroes, they were fighting for their freedoms and blah blah blah, that bullshit like that, instead of putting them behind bars or killing them, because that's what you're supposed to do to traitors of your country. And we let those people run right back into the offices that they left to enact the same goddamn laws that they were trying to do during the Civil War times, and we just let them go unpunished because of some vague bullshit of oh, but we need to keep blah blah blah, everybody happy, kumbaya. No. That's the same thing that's happening with this. They're gonna, due to bullshit of oh, we need to blah blah blah, do blah blah blah. Due to that bullshit, Trump's gonna not be able, he's gonna go be able to run for president, even though he literally should have been punished for that, and if anything, shouldn't be anywhere near the position to even run for president. But no, since everybody's so limp dick, apparently, he is still going to do the things that he does. And it's just such bullshit. Just such fucking bullshit. With that out of the way, let's just move on to the main topic of this video, because again, I could rant about that forever. Instead, we're going to be doing something that's somewhat related. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we're actually about to basically begin the United States presidential election of 2024, and due to that, I felt that it would be best to give my last-minute predictions before anything happens, because this is the last point in time where we can officially say the race hasn't really begun. Votes will be cast soon. I think they're going to be cast literally this month. Yep, 2 weeks after this episode comes out, we have the first in the nation primaries. So again, this is the last time I can make any predictions before any votes are actually cast. So I'm going to be predicting not just the presidential elections, but also some of the other elections that will be going on in 2024 in the United States. Presidential elections will of course be last. Let's start off with some other elections that are going on. First, I guess I'll just talk about the House of Representatives, because I'll just be real. Pass. I can't really make any predictions because I think we're still in the midst of redrawing some districts. And some candidates have not been finalized, so again, we can't really make any guess. Aside from that, there are too many races, I can't really predict them all. But also, another thing that's been going on is it is kind of hitting me something about the progressives in the 2024 cycle. Because Texas just announced its filing deadline, and when I checked, Henry Cuellar's district was uncompeted. Henry Cuellar is the Democratic nominee in that district. And that basically made it hit me right then and there. Oh shit, there ain't gonna be no new Justice Democrats. There ain't gonna be no new brand new Congress. There ain't gonna be no new DSA members. Like, the squad is basically staying the same size, if not shrinking. Squad is gonna remain basically on the defensive for the entirety of the 2024 cycle. Alright, next, we have the governor's races. I mean, if we're to go purely by partisanship, I think it's basically a done deal for a lot of these races. As far as I can tell, there are only 3 of the governor's races that are even being remotely considered competitive. First, West Virginia. Now, when you hear that, you might immediately go like, wait, what? But yes, despite the fact that West Virginia is technically deep red, it does have a propensity of electing Democrats as governors. Like, literally, the most recent governor, Jim Justice, literally had to lie and say he was a Democrat to get elected in the first place. And apparently, the Democrat that is running for the seat isn't that bad of a choice for the Democrats. But most people generally agree that it is still probably going to go red, but they're like, don't count it out quite yet. 2, New Hampshire. While I thought that it might have been a blue wave incoming, apparently the GOP is courting Kelly Ayotte to be their nominee in the race, who has a decent enough range to get both the conservatives in the GOP as well as their centrists. Well, Sununu basically had that similar sentiment where he was like able to court enough conservatives to make people think he's conservative enough, but also maintain sort of a centrist bend that kept him outside of the mainstream of the GOP. And Kelly sort of has that same thing, where she was somewhat conservative on some things and somewhat like not left-wing, but like liberal on some things. And that has made people go, okay, she might actually have a chance of winning. The only thing that might be slightly dangerous for her is she is kind of veering a little bit to the right for this race. And if this was a race, say... Actually, no, I was going to say if it was like a nationwide race, like a Senate seat, but actually that wouldn't work either, because as we saw in the 2022 cycle, that didn't quite work out. And the last governor's race that is considered competitive is very obvious, North Carolina. It's building up to be a very obvious Josh Stein versus Mark Robinson race. And unfortunately for Mark, race is going to be a factor. And the far right in the GOP will probably never vote for someone like Mark Robinson. That, combined with the fact that Roy Cooper and Josh Stein are basically the magic men for Democrats in North Carolina, are basically what is making me think that he has the slight edge as of now. I am more concerned with what would happen if we were to get a repeat of the 2016 election. Because for those of you who don't know, in 2016... North Carolina had a very, very, very close governor's race. We had 3 candidates, Roy Cooper, Pat McCrory, and Lon Cecil. Lon Cecil was a libertarian, so he was irrelevant. But McCrory and Cooper had like barely a percentage point ahead. Like Roy Cooper was like barely a percentage point ahead of like McCrory, and both claimed victory that night. So then it was like, okay, so what do we do now? So then McCrory, like, everybody was putting their eyes on McCrory, and they told him, what do you want to do? And he basically, like, in North Carolina, like, the second place finisher in a lot of races can actually do a lot of things. If you're in a primary with someone, and you basically are barely edging them out in a primary, the second place finisher can choose whether or not they want to go to a runoff. And in North Carolina, second place finisher can guarantee, like, if they want, they can do a recall. Not a recall, but, like, if they want, they can do a recount. And McCrory said, okay, we're going to do a recount in certain areas where there were some issues, like some areas that were really, really close, so we're going to look again. And when they did those results, like if those results leaned towards McCrory, he would have pushed for a full statewide recount. But after they recounted those areas, what ended up happening is really nothing, The results basically came out the exact same, with Roy getting the slight edge over McCrory. So then, that night, McCrory announced that he would be conceding the race to Cooper. So I'm afraid that Mark Robinson will pull a Trump and refuse to concede the race, much like Kari Lake did. I guess speaking of, we should move on to the Senate races. Because, again, Senate races are not really that much of a difference. Most of the races I see as basically a done deal. With, again, only 3 races that are being seen as anywhere close to actually competitive. Arizona, which is flipping either way, like we all know this. Arizona's flipping. Sinema's the incumbent. She's going to lose. The real question is, who is she losing to? Ruben Gallego or Kari Lake? And I would have to say, given the fact that Kari Lake is the GOP frontrunner, I doubt that it's going to go red. Ohio, while it is currently a bit of a toss-up, I would personally say that it leans blue. And I don't think that a Trumpster versus a not Trumpster is going to change the race that much, to be honest. I think Sherrod Brown has a bit too much cred in Ohio to really be pushed out that easy. Currently a lean, but I do think that it will probably go blue. I think Sherrod still has it in him. It will probably be his closest race, all things considered, but I still think Sherrod Brown has it. And last, but certainly not least, Montana, who, as of now, I still have to just say toss-up. In my heart of hearts, I want to say blue, but I can't be 100% sure on this one. Especially considering there's still one person who I don't necessarily know if he's running or not. Matt Rosendale, who has basically been running without running. Basically, a lot of prominent Republicans have been endorsing a candidate by the name of Tim Sheehy, and Matt Rosendale has basically been trying to do a thing where he's like, oh, I don't want the, establishment to pick the candidates that represents Montana. I'm going to be the candidate that represents Montana. But wait, I'm not. Donate money to me to pick a candidate who doesn't represent Mitch McConnell's interests. Effectively, he's been effectively saying he's going to run without actually running. And there are many reasons why I think that it might. I don't know if it would work or not, because here's the thing. Matt Rosendale has run for Senate against Jon Tester before, and it seems that he was the worst performing candidate of all of the people who ran against Jon Tester. Jon Tester has a similarly long record as Sherrod Brown. Here's his first run. Tester 49.2 with Conrad Burns 48.3. And the next one, 2012, 48.6 to 44.9. And the one with Rosendale, 50.33, 46.78. I mean, at the very least, it looks like he had a higher margin because, like this one, Tester was 50 points. So it's again, I don't know if, but this thing, it's I don't know if it is going to work this time around, but I don't know. If I had to place a bet, I would say the next Senate is going to be a 50-50 split, with Testers being the race that is effectively going to decide control of the Senate. Alright, so here's the one that you've actually been waiting for. My predictions on the 2024 presidential election. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is this. Trump and Biden are going to be the nominees. I don't know if you really needed me to say that, but I think a lot of people still do need me to say that. Even with this whole coping, they're seeing, with these two, places that are saying that they don't want to put Trump on the primary ballot, there's some people who think, oh, maybe there's actually momentum this time. Now we can actually get someone else. It's no. Even if these decisions hold, what's going to happen is 2 states are not going to Trump. That's it. If the 2 states that weren't going to Trump were states that were the first 2 in the primaries, then maybe it would have some impact. But they're not. They're Super Tuesday seats, I think. Or, they're not the early states. If they were early states, again, it could mean something. Unless this decision actually kicks Trump off the ballot, then it really is not going to be that much of an impact. Who's going to win those 2 states? I don't know, just pick whoever's polling second in those states. But again, really, it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee and Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. A lot of people are still trying to cope with that. And that's why I've basically taken this moment to acknowledge I refuse to acknowledge any single poll as of today. Look at the goddamn polls for the actual election. People still are coping with the idea that maybe it won't be Trump v. Biden. Like, we're seeing this all the time. Like, Marianne Williamson people are still coping. Like, maybe she has a chance now. And we're seeing DeSantis people saying, oh, now he has a chance now. And look at the elections. They're fucking they're fucking polling like Biden versus Trump versus Cornel West versus Jill Stein versus Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And they're treating all these candidates like, oh yeah, they're all equal. They're all completely equal. And that's the problem. It's like, that's not really important because at the end of the day, we're still at the point where people are still thinking in their head of a hypothetical new scenario. There are some people who are still thinking that Biden's going to get swapped out at the last second by Kamala Harris. And there's some people who still think maybe the GOP will finally grow a backbone and just say, fuck Trump. But neither of which is going to happen. It is going to be Trump v. Biden. Like, I mean, literally, look at the poll. There are some polls that literally have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at 15%. Really. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., of all of the people in the history of the United States third-party scene, you legitimately think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be the one in the modern day and age to get 15% in the fucking polls. Meanwhile, Ralph fucking Nader, one of the most prominent individuals in U.S. history, couldn't get 15%. But no, the literal nobody in the Kennedy family, he's the one who's going to get 15%. It's a similar sentiment that a lot of people have been saying. A lot of people have been saying this. We've heard this all the time since 2016. Screw the polls, like fuck the polls. The polls mean nothing. I wouldn't say that the polls mean nothing. I wouldn't say that. Ignore the fact that I've basically been saying they're nothing. But like, what I mean is, the polls are good indicators, but they're not like gospel. That's the thing. Like, everybody should acknowledge that. Polls are not gospel. They're not completely meaningless, but again, they are not gospel. We've been shown many, many times how polls aren't necessarily as accurate as they can be. One of the most infamous examples from long ago that we all learned in history class, Dewey beats Truman. We learned very infamously in 2016 that we shouldn't rely on the polls 100% of the time. And we also learned a little bit in the 2020 election that primary polls, like, this is the thing about polls. The polls, they are good at showing some trends, but again, don't treat it as gospel. Especially this early in the stage. Like, I mean, I know I keep saying this, like, it is still relatively early. Never treat a poll as its gospel. Treat a poll as a trend that you look at. And you should only start paying attention to polls in the, like, after the conventions. Like, after the parties officially nominate their nominees, then you can start looking at the polls a bit more seriously. And then they get a bit more serious every month when the election draws near. And the polls can be skewed based on who you ask, how many people you ask, etc., etc. Like, for example, you see this all the time on Fox News. Fox News will literally say, we're in Georgia, the heart of Trump country. And it's like, wait, didn't Georgia vote for Biden in the last cycle? But then it's like, look, we interviewed all these people in this fucking, like, MAGA bar, and they all love Trump. Ergo, Georgia is going to go red. And that's the thing, every single poll does that. It'll be like, if you actually look at the polls, like, polls do show, like, it's smaller amounts of people, like, they do show not that many people, like, respond to polls. A lot of people don't genuinely respond to polls. Like, I mean, I've never been called by a pollster. I guarantee you, if a lot of people around my age were called by pollsters, we'd be seeing a lot more people openly saying AOC 2024. My viewpoint is basically this. Always campaign as if Joe Biden is down by 5, or down by, like, 3. Basically, always campaign as if he has just enough edge to win, but he's down. You can't just campaign how many points he's under. You have to campaign more than the points he's under. If he's down by 5, you have to campaign as if he's down by 6. If he's up by 5, campaign as if he's up by 1. Basically, no matter what, imagine that he is really close to the line, regardless of what side of the line he is on. Think of it as if he's close to that line, and if your movement can push him to be further away from that line, or if it can push him above the line. I had a different spiel to explain that point, but the problem is, the way I explained it, it makes it seem like more doomeristic, because I always think of it like campaign hard no matter what, but of course, if you think that Joe Biden is going to go down 10 points, at that point, what is the point of campaigning? Basically, don't get complacent. Now, a lot of people have been trying to think about, like, what about 2024? Like, what would the map look like for 2024? And the fact is, you really have to look no further than 2020's map to understand, and not just look at that map and then go, done, which some people have done. We need to acknowledge this. Of those 50 states, 9 were close, which means that these 9 are the swing seats that will be the deciding factors for 2024. So basically, if I call out your state's name, you have no excuse but to vote for Joe Biden. The closest states in question are Texas, Florida, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia. Now, they're not all equal by any means. Let's start with Texas. Texas had a 5.58% Republican lead. Now, the state has been trending more blue as the years have gone on. Very impressive, all things considered, especially considering Texas has been regarded as the Republican safe seat for a while now. And many people even start to speculate. It's like, if Texas goes blue, then it's over. There is no way that the GOP can make it up. Which is why the GOP is very obviously taunting around the Great Replacement theory, because they're trying to make it seem like race war is going to try and ruin their chances. Because the thing is, that's always the truth. Republicans know that more people voting equals them losing. So that's why they want less people to vote. Less people to vote equals more votes for the GOP. So your complacency of not voting for the Dems is what's going to cause the GOP to win. That's always been the case for Democrats. It's never been more Republicans voting. That has never been the case. It is always less Democrats voting, or less Democrat-leaning voters voting. All it takes is less people. Like, Democrats historically vote less, because unlike Republicans, Democrats are sane people who understand that voting isn't like the biggest thing in the world. Like, Republicans have this fake idea of like, it's our civic duty to vote. Meanwhile, Democrats, or again, Democrat-leaning voters or independents, they have like actual lives to live, so they understand that there's more to life than voting for a candidate. But there's one problem. Due to that leads to them having more scrutiny for their own candidates, and also not being likely to vote for them if they're not exactly perfect. Meanwhile, the GOP, despite all those people that cry and bitch and moan, like, if Trump's not the nominee, we're not going to vote. That's not true. Every single one of those fascists are going to be lining up to vote for DeSantis if he wins. They will line up to vote for Haley. They would have lined up to vote for Pence. They would have lined up to vote for Vivek. They would have fucking lined up to vote for anybody with an R next to their name. Meanwhile, Democrats are, even though we've acknowledged that a lot of liberals, quote unquote, are vote blue no matter who, we acknowledge they're not. The most diehard liberals on Twitter are the people who are going to say that Bernie Sanders should have never been the Democratic nominee, and that if he were, they would have contemplated sitting home. Because everybody knows the Democrats hold their nominees to more scrutiny than the Republicans. Republicans are in a cult. Democrats are not in a cult. With that being said, what does that mean for Texas? Well, simply put, I think Texas is a bit more in play. Like, there are some people who are even going so far as to say if Biden just plays his cards right, he could win Texas. And people said the same thing about Bernie. Like, in 2020, they were like, he legitimately could have won Texas. He didn't, but he could have. Now, I don't necessarily know if I would say that he has the chance to win Texas quite yet. I think he can build more Democratic strong roots there. We have been seeing a lot of Democrats win very viably in those areas, including some people who you wouldn't even consider to be winners in those areas. I mean, fucking Greg Casar is a literal socialist who represents Texas. I mean, it ain't necessarily that far off to think that maybe Democrats could win that state again. But, again, I'm not sure if I would give this state to them quite yet. Now, Florida is one that is very interesting because even though we all understand it has been steadily, it's basically the opposite of Texas. It's been shifting heavily to the right ever since, like, a while, and it is technically still within the realm of possibility that Biden wins. Like, Trump won by a smaller margin in Florida in the 2020 election, but the problem is, people have basically considered that Florida is too far gone, despite the fact that it is, again, basically very slimly going over the line. So, I don't really know about that. Next is Michigan. Michigan was the closest of the Rust Belt states in the last cycle, and it is the only one that is very, very worrying because Michigan has a large Arab/Muslim population that has threatened to withhold their votes for Joe Biden in the upcoming election. And as I said not that long ago, all it takes is for less votes for the Democrats, not necessarily more votes for the Republicans. So that's where the sweat starts coming in. Nevada, while the state is mostly going blue, there's still a tiny hint of red that is itching to come out, and it's waiting for the right time to strike. North Carolina is basically the reverse of that. It is mostly red with a hint of blue that can be tapped into. I actually saw a tweet that literally explained that Nevada and North Carolina are the yin and yang of the 2020 election, or the 2024 election, and I have to say that does kind of make sense. The next ones are Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Now, while Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are a bit blue-leaning, we understand they're from areas that are pretty blue-leaning, we also remember the last time we took those two states for granted, and people are a little bit worried, but I think there is one small glimmer of potential hope that we can take from this. You see, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, the same year that Trump won, they had two incumbent senators running for re-election. Wisconsin had Ron Johnson, and Pennsylvania had Pat Toomey. But for 2024, it's reversed. Now their other senators are running for the seats. Bob Casey in Pennsylvania and Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. So maybe they can use their magic to help turn out Democrat votes. Next, Arizona. Now, Arizona is a very weird one because Arizona, I guess I might as well just say it. This is the closest thing that you can even convince me of a haunting. Because ever since, John McCain's death, this state has not really been doing any favors for Trump. I guess you could say it's literally just, the state being in revenge against Trump. Because, if you remember, McCain and Trump had a very huge disagreement with each other. So basically, ever since 2016, the state has not gone in Trump's favor. With the exception being in 2018 with the governor's race, wish McCain worked his magic then, but regardless, in every federal election, Senate, basically the Senate races and the presidential race, they have not been going to Trump, they've been going to the Democrats. Now, granted, slim edges for most of the races, so it isn't technically impossible for the state to go back red. But if I had to take a guess, it would have to be someone who is not of the Trump wing to get it back in. Like, for example, for the Senate races, for some reason they just nominate the fucking, Trumpsters, and then, lo and behold, it doesn't work so well. And last but certainly not least, Georgia. We were saved by a voter drive. I don't know if Georgia did a racism to prepare for this race, but without a Warnock on the ballot to increase votes, I don't know if that slim margin will be able to last. Now, if you've been paying attention to the electoral map, you would know that that means there are 163 electoral votes up for grabs. Now, if you were to go by polls, as many people are thinking, when they see a poll, they're just oh, Biden's done. If you were to go by the actual polls, as of yet, every single one of those states that I listed would go to Trump in the upcoming election. Except for Pennsylvania, which, if I remember correctly, was a tie. Not to be that guy, but I don't think that is likely. Now, funny thing is, all of those states are each in a different area of belts. Georgia and North Carolina are in the Bible Belt. Then we have the Sun Belt and the Rust Belt. So yeah, I just found that information a little interesting. Now, if I were to take a guess, I'll just say this. North Carolina, Florida, and Texas, solidly in the red area. Look, there's a chance they could flip. I acknowledge this. But I, at the end of the day, do have to say, I think that these 3 states are going to go red. Maybe next time we'll have something there. But as of yet, still red town. Now, one thing that I think a lot of you probably want to hear are what are my takes on the 3 Rust Belt states. Because the 3 Rust Belt states have been historically, well, at least since modern history, have been a bit of an issue. And I'll just say this. The reason why Hillary lost those 3 states was because she didn't show up to those states and she had anti-union records for that election. Biden has maintained a relatively pro-union record. So I would say that these 3 states will probably go blue. And if you're following along at home, then you already know that things are already in good favor for Biden. But we have to keep pressing on. What about the rest of the states? I would say that the Sun Belt also goes blue because at the end of the day, large Latino communities, and Trump isn't really doing anything to earn their favor. You see, the reason why there's some people have been pointing out the fact that Hispanics voted a lot more for Trump than in 2016. But that was because in 2020, he wasn't making immigration that big of an issue. But now, it appears that he's making immigration back into one of his forefront issues. Like, he's been going really hard against Mexican and, Latino immigrants and stuff. And now, his rhetoric on immigration is harder than his tic-tac in a Lolita Express. So, honestly, I think it's not really going to win Hispanics over that much. And Georgia, I'd have to say, is a toss-up. It could go either way, in my opinion. But it doesn't matter, because either way it goes, Joe Biden has won the presidency. Hooray! Hopefully, my vibes-based predictions will be based on any sort of reality come the actual election. So yeah, that is my predictions so far about the 2024 elections. Feel free to take this episode and then point out how wrong I am later, especially if NC flips blue. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video of mine comes out. And if you need some more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.